need to remember that.
Sue Bradford implied, like, when she was talking about the unlikely decision, she implied that part of the reasoning was the Greens kind of saying, screw you for not letting us be part of your government. For
So it's your fault.
3 years.
Again,
so, like, but
it's always Labor's fault, isn't it? I get it now.
But, do you think that might have been part of their intention?
Don't know, you'd have to ask them.
Yeah.
Okay, so sticking on environmental things, Rena is obviously the issue of the day, big issue. To what extent is it going to change this election campaign?
Some political commentator wondered if it was Keys Katrina.
Yes.
I think I never really believe that a single issue turns elections like that. It's very rare, I think, when that happens. What I do think it is, though, is another example of where the government's looking for other people to blame and not showing the kind of leadership that I think people want. So I think when you add it to, say, something like the credit downgrade comments recently, the stuff around the opening of the Rugby World Cup, I think it starts to accumulate in people's mind that maybe we might like the smiling Mr. Key, but the National maybe isn't showing that leadership.
So what's your argument that it reaches some critical mass, that the straw that breaks the camel's back?
These things always, I believe in I'm not a political scientist, as you pointed out, but I believe that often in politics things accumulate.
Okay.
It's a little bit like saying the repeal of Section 59 was the straw that broke the camel's back for Labor or whatever. It probably wasn't on its own, but it could it could accumulate. And I think similarly here, will it accumulate in time for the election?
But that's basically Labor's strategy, isn't it? That you keep on pushing hard on National on all their little stuff-ups and where they're a bit rough on certain issues, with this idea that it's going to accumulate, build up a narrative of mishandling things. And then when the king happens, like Rena, that comes from nowhere, it all fits together as a pattern. And
that's probably part of it. I wouldn't say that's the strategy. I mean, the strategy is to offer a bold and different approach to the economy, which I think...
Well, you're going to say that.
Well, no, but I also think we're doing it as well. But yeah, sure. I mean, politics are elections, are both about voting out a government and voting in a new one. Yeah. And so you've got to give people a reason to vote for you. But yeah, sure. Okay. I think the way that Rena's gone does indicate some of the issues that could be wrong with
Okay, we'll come back to Rena in a sec, because you've just said something interesting about giving people a reason to vote Labor. And I sort of wonder whether that's the reason you're in the doldrums, 30% or less in some opinion polls, that you still aren't, or for some reason or another, people don't perceive that you're that different to this current government.
Well, I don't think that perception's accurate. I mean, sure. At the CTU conference recently, one of your old comrades, Robert Reid, got up and said Labor Party has the most progressive policy platform it's had since Norman Kirk. So I think we do have that policy platform.
So what's happening?
Well, that's the perception issue that you're getting at, and I think that's a reality of politics. We were in government for 9 years. People built up certain perceptions about us. New Zealanders are basically fair-minded people. They want to give the other side a go. And the question is, are people ready to be able to say, yes, you can come back? There's not a history of voting out governments after one term in New Zealand, but we think that we can do that. We think that we've got the policies to do that, and we'll see how the election goes. Okay. But yeah, I accept the fact that the polling is not as good as we want it to be. Okay. It's not. So I can't deny that there is an issue there, but I don't think it's about the not giving people a reason to vote for us. I think we have.
Yes, maybe, but you agree that the perception might be that there's not a reason enough to vote for Labor?
No, I don't. I think that the perception is around those issues I raised about whether people are ready to vote Labor back into a government again. I think as we get closer to the election campaign and people get the post Rugby World Cup election campaign, that people start to get their heads around the no asset sales, the capital gains tax, the other tax changes. They'll actually start to say, yeah, these are good reasons to vote for Labor.
How's the Cup going?
How's the Cup going? The tournament itself, or the rugby?
You're a rugby specialist commentator from way back. What's your take
the tournament?
on it?
I think the tournament itself's been magnificent. I mean, I absolutely love the way that New Zealand's got in behind it. The rugby side today is I woke up this morning and I was listening to some stuff on the radio. The first day I got nervous was today.
About how she had nightmares.
But then she said that we won 94-0, but she missed the second half.
Yeah.
So I think the All Blacks can do it, but I'm starting to get a bit nervous.
Okay.
Because it's
Will it help
semi-final
the
time.
campaign?
What's that? I don't think it'll matter to the campaign.
Okay. So you're going to any games?
Not anymore. I've been to 3. And I went to the Australia-South Africa quarterfinal last weekend, and if the Australians cheat the way that they did and get away with it the way that they did in that game against us, it's going to be difficult.
Okay, you went in a corporate box yelling at Australians?
I was in a corporate box, but I wasn't yelling at Australians.
Okay. No. Back to the Rena thing then. It strikes me that it's quite difficult, well, it's an opportunity and it's a danger for politicians at the moment, in the sense that we've got this election campaign on, and it's a heavily political thing, a ship, Elvis disaster. And so you've got Phil Goff, on the beaches, smiling to the cameras, digging up oil. Some people think it looks a bit desperate.
Do you think it looks desperate, Bryce? Is that what you're saying?
Well, not necessarily. I guess my question is, how do politicians balance, the thing of between looking too opportunistic and actually representing the people who are getting angry and have got questions about why this is potentially being mismanaged?
Exactly. It's exactly as you describe it. It's a balance, and I don't think it's responsible of an opposition party not to hold the government to account and to challenge them and to ask questions about whether the response was adequate in this case. Did the government do all the things it could have done? And so I think that's a reasonable role to play. Equally, we don't want to get in the way of the recovery effort, and I don't think we're doing that.
No.
So, Christchurch is a bigger example of that, where I think the local Labour MPs in Christchurch have done an amazing job of being there, helping their constituents on a day-to-day basis, but also raising the questions about whether the overall response is working. So
you are the campaign spokesperson. So how is Labour going to, on the ground, try and do something like that in Tauranga or Bay of
Well, I think it's already happening. We've raised a number of questions about whether the spill was dealt with adequately in those first 4 or 5 days. And we've got serious questions about that. We've raised the issues about whether Maritime New Zealand's actually been funded properly by the government. And I think that's actually a serious issue. There's an independent report done in December 2010 that said there was a high risk that Maritime New Zealand was not going to be able to fulfil all of its safety functions.
But couldn't that argument be turned around against you, that Labour governments have sort of played a role in that underfunding?
No, we increased the funding for Maritime New Zealand almost every year that we were in government. You reach 2009 and the national government freezes that funding.
Sure.
And so, I would reject that. I actually think we were supporting that. But these are the questions that have got to be asked about it, and the government, needs to deal with the spill. I get that, but they're also not immune from those questions.
So what about the bigger public policy issue of the deregulated state of the maritime industry? And Labour seem to be in favour of that deregulated state. So isn't that part of the problem? That's certainly what the unions are saying.
It is one of the issues that we've got to look at, and I'm not close enough to that side of it to know exactly whether the sufficient regulations were there or not. But it's quite clear to me that in terms of how we use ocean space, we need to take another look and say, do we have adequate regulations here?
There's a question on the Twitter sphere. Will Labour put a moratorium on oil tankers and container ships that use oil?
Oil tankers and container ships?
Wow.
No, we won't be doing that. What we are saying is that we believe there should be a moratorium on offshore drilling, because I'm not confident that we actually are in a position to deal with a problem if it occurred. But no, not on ships. Actually, we think there should be more use of coastal shipping in New Zealand, because it's actually quite a sustainable way of moving freight around New Zealand.
Just less drunken birthday parties on.
Yeah, I was going to say, just avoid the reefs.
Okay, but this moratorium, I think that'll be a popular idea, but doesn't that ignore the fact that you've got all these explorations that are happening now? So Labour's willing for them to go ahead and continue. But
the ones that, we've done offshore drilling in New Zealand for a very, very long time. But deep sea offshore drilling, the kinds of proposals that are out there now, bring you to, as I understand it, to another whole level of risk. And I think that actually now is a good time to be able to say, before any of that deep sea offshore drilling takes place, let's stop and say, do we have the regulations?
Connected to that as well, what with the Labour Party, it was kind of partly to do with a question that was on Twitter about, New Zealand's 100% pure brand, at the same time our agricultural brand, and how a Labour government would kind of reconcile that.
I think we've got to do much better to live up to that brand. And that's not, I accept criticism of the last Labour government around those issues. We did some good things in the environment area, but ensuring that we see the economy, and I know it's the cliched thing, but ensuring that we see the economy and the environment together is really important. And we sort of moved into that space without really occupying it in the last government, and that's something, from my personal point of view, I'd like to see a future Labour government be much more clear that those two things go together. And
Well, yeah, because the last government was really big on sustainability, but I never really got a sense of how they were going to operationalise that. What it actually
well, we
meant
did.
beyond.
I mean, we did it. What the decision was made, rightly or wrongly, to focus on particular sectors, and we focused on water was the first one, and some interesting initiatives happened here. But that's the point. I'm actually agreeing with you. The point is that we didn't grasp that as a core part of government, and for me, that is actually what I think a future Labor government should do.
But on that water quality thing, the Greens are pretty critical of you. They say that you have been crap on water, as bad as national.
Well, no,
What
I
do you
mean,
think?
we advanced work around national standards on water, and I think that we did do some good things. But it is true to say that lakes and rivers in New Zealand are more polluted now than they were, and that the Greens have got into that issue and good on them.
Okay.
We cleaned up Lake Taupo. We started the Rotorua Lakes clean-ups. So we did actually do things in that area, but there's obviously more to do.
Okay. Now, one of the things we hear most from Grant Robertson, Labor MP for Wellington Central, is about the public service, and you've fought tooth and nail against what the government's been doing in terms of restructuring and downsizing government departments. But yesterday we've had this announcement from David Cunliffe, if I understand it rightly, that he's saying, well, basically we agree with the government now. He says, I can't remember his exact words, but it's something like, we want a bipartisan agreement about fiscal austerity. There'll be no lottie scrambles for public servants. What's going on? Isn't that embarrassing for you?
No. I think what David's saying is that, like the National Party, we believe that we have to keep debt under control. And I think New Zealanders accept that we don't want spiralling levels of debt. So in order to do that, we're going to have to be careful about the money that we spend. What that isn't agreeing with, though, is the way that the National Party's gone about it, which is indiscriminate cuts to the public service, just going into departments and saying, you must cut X percentage of money. That's not the approach Labor would take. What we want to do is actually work with the public service to make sure that it operates efficiently and effectively and delivers services. So don't confuse the fact that we want to lower debt with taking the same approach as national. The idea of a consensus is around the idea of lowering debt, not around the idea of cutting public services.
You know how Bill English said the other day that if